Shirley here with Sirius Dallas Moon in our series of not the most optimal elections, but not the worst elections for an episode. And I want to talk about Moon Hour. Okay. Yeah. I want to talk about Belgium going from beginning denuclearification to, I haven't bought my Angelica essential oil yet. It might be next month. um, Going from denuclearification to state confiscation of the nuclear stuff, the nuclear stuff, their textile factories. And this was a surprising move that kind of, when we think about the EU center sitting in Brussels, and we think about denuclearification, I was just talking about Jupiter squaring Aries Chiron from Procyon, where it's just the point it went retrograde, and I was talking about denuclearification as a process that necessitates abolishing occultistic abuse, and particularly occultistic rape, and thereby extortion cults. Now, this is where indeed another one of my predictions, and that was that as partial as the abolishing of extortion cult is as partial as the denuclearification process is. Now here is, let's get to the drama, because Pluto is leaving the square with Aries slowly, and this is slowly, it's a decade and a half slowly, progressing towards the sextile, the closing sextile with Aries, where if we understand that nuclear policies were generated within occultistic rape of infants, even Epstein-like cults, we understand denuclearification necessitates abolishing extortion cults. Now, we haven't abolished tanks, we haven't abolished drones, we haven't abolished our military use of guns, and then we want to abolish nuclear. How do we think we're going to do it? Like, what is the one thing that changes nuclear weapon from weapon trade and exempts it from not being abolished but rather being refined? And indeed, we have nitrogen bombs, we have weird letter bombs, we have I mean, not me personally. And so, and that move from the square, from Pluto arguing with Aries, and Aries are issues of occultistic rape, with Pluto arguing. So if you think about, for example, that argument could be Pluto, hey, let's develop more nuclear weapon. Lilith, well, we'll have to extort more people, rape more people. Well, actually, abolishing occultistic rape can even refine atomic energy in a way that we may find nuclear weapon without the margins, or nuclear weapon without the horrid repercussions. And there were attempts to refine that, particularly during the square. We're hearing about microatomic weapon, where Israelis were somehow told that they could stay 30 meters underground for 48 hours, and they're like good to go. So obviously they're not good to go, but it's also not 70 years, which we also need to take into account. Could be 150, I mean, I don't know. But this is where the disagreement between Pluto and Aries necessitated different thinking. Micro A bombs, or even bigger bombs, or but not a Hiroshima and Nagasaki moment. We might not have that luxury towards the sextile. And this move of Belgium, as Jupiter is 18 degrees, Mars approaching the square with Jupiter from Aries, from its home sign, Saturn co-present with Mars, and the state, particularly the state where the center of the EU sits, and also various centers of NATO, the military alliance, um, decides to confiscate, to um, to com- to comificate. Hey, mom. Previously, in What Would Stalin Do? um, and this is where we are building from a constructive and destructive argument. And this could literally be where that argument can be between, oh, let's drop the bombs. Wait a second, why A bombs when we have hydrogen bombs? Or why spend money dropping an A bomb when we could have like a micro A bomb? And even that back and forth can literally be the square, where leaving the square, Belgium takes it all the way back from literally denuclearification to confiscation of the nuclear industry by the state. How should I say that? Not even in Soviet Russia. Now, that move can definitely be Pluto leaving the square and Uranus applying to trine Pluto. Uranus Sedna. Now, Sedna can be treason simply because Sedna in her good energy means standing one's ground so much that even extortion cults can't get through. But we, you know, I wish I could say we're right there. Um, and in a right there move, we would see an utter total and complete denuclearification process stemming in from whichever first country, because it would precede by abolishing occultistic rape and sovereignty-based occultism, which means no occultistic rape, no slavery, no rape. And that would be a point of attraction with unprecedented advantage. A completely shifting of the paradigm of power right on time with Saturn in the area in the sign of Aries, which is new things, and Pluto in the sign of Aquarius, which is shifting the scientific paradigms and scientific revolutions. So, if you think about it, if you want to have the one thing that changes everything, I can't say it's taken, but it's definitely my patent. And yet, it's not something to patent, because when we talk about abolishing occultistic rape, that's the Wi-Fi upon which everything. It's an infrastructure of the world. And anybody that tends to developing that is basically entering a direct from May with May. Um, I've numerous times elaborated on various methods that could be of point of attraction when we talk about um, changing the intelligence and the supporting esoterics and the supportive scripture. I already began to work on elections for writing supportive scripture. Um, as per the rituals, we're talking about relaxed arousal, nourishing yin, nourishing yang, secure attachment based. I have a wisdom to cure before I can even practice that. Um, but the framework is set, and towards that closing sextile, we could, it could be a Hiroshima and Nagasaki moment, but it can also be an actual agreement on denuclearification, and without the occultistic rape that is the raison d'etre for the majority of the type of rape cases that can't be litigated in court, but also behind the policies that created the, let's just say, the excessive use of power, or behind the type of strategies or the type of wartime strategies that we would look back and say, well, it looked like a great idea at the time. And so um, now the difference between it looked like a great idea at the time and not is whether one was basically ritually abused or not at the time. Don't ask me how and why I'm so certain. Um, and so I would not be looking at the processes of the nuclear on surface level. I would be looking at Aries, and I would be looking at abolishing occultistic rape and having sovereignty supportive occultism, which is zero rape, zero slavery, zero energy siphoning. Definitely doesn't go with slavery, human sacrifice, or doesn't necessitate sacrifice, by the way. I know from people that were African occultists, even men, they used something like hibiscus for deities that required blood sacrifice, and in previous times even infant blood sacrifice, and they got great results according to them. So yeah, I mean that's something to think about when we think about a lot of the occultistic practices and the deities as egregores. And there were a lot of technological experiments with occult that can probably even more validate. So there isn't a reason to use the archaic tools of torture, sacrifice, and so on and so forth, or fragmentation and whatnot. Um, Particularly when the objective is being a visionary rather than controlling everything, which is an awful burden. Um, Being a visionary and having those visions come into alignment in the best possible outcome. Now, for that, we're talking about the season of the practices alongside occultistic rape and the curation from, which is again nourishing yin, nourishing yang, going into embodiment, meeting erotic, non-erotic needs adaptively, and forming secure attachment. It sounds big, but there are big things happening in the world right now. I can definitely see the Pluto-Aries sextile being about denuclearification, particularly because it's the closing sextile, particularly because of the unprecedented cycle of Sedna. We had a bisextile involving Sedna, with Uranus Sedna. Now Uranus is going to go into its synodic cycle with Sedna as the rest of the planets, but with Sedna being in Gemini, unprecedented. And the 0-degree Gemini, watch my series about Alcyone or Alcyone. It's 0-degree in Gemini stands at that. Do we create a situation where it's safe and free to be a girl, to be a feminine? It is not. It will not be safe and free to be a masculine, because what negated that was what negated sovereignty in the world was feminization rituals as degradation. And this is where, how should I say that? And this is the turning point between agreeing to drop. Now, when we talk about agreeing to drop the A-bomb, that would be from where Rahu is about now, which is the nakshatra between Den and Balgadi and Fomalhaut. We're talking about Pluto moving towards Den and Balgadi in the coming a little bit less than 20 years, and Aries only ingressing into Taurus in the mid-40s. So at around that time, that back and forth is going to be the sextile, the closing sextile, and Deneb Algedi is wealth redistribution. It's considered the sacrifice star, but we saw in the French Revolution what was sacrificed was the warlocks that burned the witches. And Marie Antoinette. We can't exclude the queen, the queen of cake. So now, and Fomalhaut, where Fomalhaut is the wisdom of the bottom of the ocean. And here is the thing, the aggravation around is because everybody know what the telos is if we don't abolish occultistic rape. Let me break it down to you in a one-liner. Towards the coming century, it's about being those few Catholic Christians Jeanne d'Arc won't even go as far. She done a femicide, birthing by raped children that are considered pure only until the birth, because and yes, using extreme tactics to combat the Islam, but massacring any Protestant that don't argue on the scripture, for women equity and honoring the feminine, and kind of like, hey, if you want to go Templar, you better be the Pope, because the Pope closed himself in Rome and declared a prisoner in his own country. So there was only one Pope. It was a good trick. Uh, and we're talking about around the 2060s. So, up until then, there will be, I talked about Neptune in Aries as the rise of Protestant religion, um, because of so many things, whether it's the praxis of war that doesn't allow for ceremonial gatherings when people are running from place to place and so on. And the rise of no intermediate connection with the God. This was also, when you think about Kant, Immanuel Kant, the not worshiping the saints in self-denominations, simply as kind of a different gnosis, a more down-to-earth gnosis, where the God is not represented by human, and yet each and every human can have a closer connection. Now, of course, it varies tremendously, but this was a great movement towards many things. And then the Huguenots were massacred, which caused the expedition. If you don't like Dutch colonialism, how should I say that? Complain to Catholicism, particularly to Roman Catholicism. Um, now, and here, um, and now here is the thing: for the torturous salvation based, this is a kind of dark golden ages. But there not going to be too many to experience. There not going to be too many. Like the Catholics were the David versus Goliath towards Islam, but they took it on the Huguenots and which were the Calvinists and the Protestants. So if you're building on declaring yourself a devout Catholic Christian, that strategy will probably not be so feasible. And if I go to, okay, then what ended the Inquisition? It was secular people. Now, yes, some people might try to adapt by being both, evangelist Catholicism and then turning into this secular. And by the way, those are natural transits. Most of the saints that were upside down, they were secular. They were secular before they transformed religion. And but if I think about what would be the timeline of the abolition of the Inquisition, it's honoring the feminine. Now, when we think about occult and we think about war tactics, we think about aligning the energy into a yin-yang balance, nourishing yin, nourishing yang. Now, I know a lot easier said than done. It's a reason why people study traditional Chinese medicine and aligning yin and yang for literally decades. That being said, the war tactics, and this was promoted by the infiltration of the Epstein a lot also about the Centaurians, the Kissinger methods, the thought that, oh, we are going to strike them so much they wouldn't even think to do that again, generates it perpetuates a war. They kind of like they're going to be helpless and then manifest, and this keeps things in the teeter tatter, which doesn't serve humanity. And as we saw with the Epstein dossiers, can cause tremendous upheavals. Let's just put it that way. The shooting in the White House. A lot of people saying, oh, that was fake and so on and so forth. I want you to think about the scenario when somebody, let's go with that. Let's say that was fake. I want you to think about the scenario when somebody would have to fake that type of scenario. And by the way, and when we're talking about treason cults, and everybody being mind controlled. Yeah. So, like I said, abolishing occultistic rape is the one thing that changes everything. From the common citizen to citizen number one, and of any nation, or even particularly a global government. Yeah. Now, definitely Pluto between then Balgadi to Fomalhaut, agreeing with Aries on Andromeda constellation is kind of like, you know, if Andromeda was the woman that was saved from being a sacrifice to the sea monster, then the scenario would be sacrificing the village that would sacrifice a young maiden to the sea monster. Okay, it's an A bomb. It's a oh my God. So, by the way, when I was in academia, in my first degree, and there were the possible scenarios of a nuclear equilibrium, and we had to do kind of like a brainstorming of war strategy. And one of the things I said was, well, an A bomb can drop. And then the person who was a teaching assistant back then was really, really excited in a bad way. He was like, do you know how this thing even works? If they drop it in Iran, it reaches to Israel. I'm going to say it again. If they drop it in Iran, it reaches to Israel. If something leaks in Iran. Anyway, and vice versa. And I said something very simple. You asked us to brainstorm the possibilities. It's one of the possibilities. 2026 and people talking about whether even the world is talking about the possibility of Israel a bombing itself. Would that be a false flag? I don't know. When the false flag is the real flag. No, broadcasting from Israel. And yeah. um, Now this is how should I say that? Um, yeah. Yeah. So it's it's not a sextile that how Hiroshima and Nagasaki were between Cancer, between Procyon, okay, and Leo. To the defense of Los Alamos, Pluto was passing Procyon before that. It wasn't dropping on like Procyon. It wasn't Pluto Procyon. I don't know if Pluto Procyon started at Los Alamos, because Feynman has Pluto around Sirius, and he would have been born then, and then Pluto Procyon could have been the call. Like I don't the Einstein call. With the excuse that the Germans would do it anyway. And again, that it's kind of like, is it an excuse? Is it, or is it like an actual argument? Now, Pluto Leo, definitely the ingress of Pluto Leo was notable. Talking in tropical astrology, of course, sidereally it would still be Cancer. Now, to think about the fact that those things are actually astrologically elected. And by the way, the square between Pluto and Aries can absolutely be about those type of arguments. No, we want to wait till Pluto is in Aquarius. No, sidereally, Pluto is still in Capricorn. What do we want to achieve spiritually? It's an occultistic ritual. An A-bomb drop is an occultistic ritual. Now, all of this happening in a world that's supposed to be democratic. For example, they have no problem to do a referendum in countries like Iceland of whether to join or not to join the EU. The call to explode the population and force everybody to give birth doesn't align with referendum. For example, we can have a referendum in Iceland, but to have a referendum in China or in United States, by the way, would not be technologically impossible. Particularly with the powers of computation and developing powers of computations and the supporting infrastructure of technology that's happening with the big boom of the V6 style and the Venupiter meeting around Sirius earlier this year or last year. This is where how should I say that? Those are the transits that were still kind of like two cities being bombed. That's not the spirit of Aquarius. So when the person with a lot of divination in the ninth house, which ruler rules over Pluto in Scorpio, tells you a lot about total extinction, using this type of power to such a degree that there are no margins, is not, when I was saying, yeah, an AMOB could drop in a politics and governance department in Israel, and the teaching assistant went, like, thought that this was crazy. And I'm like, well, I'm not judging whether it's crazy or not, I'm judging what are the possibilities. And this is definitely something that is on the table today. Don't be fooled to think that what I said about the total global extinction is not. And definitely don't be fooled to think that there would be something exempt between Deneb Algedy to freaking Fomalhaut, from the bottom of the ocean to the global air, or underneath the ocean even. Now, how was the problem originating? Occultistic rape. How do we antidote that? Abolish occultistic rape from the occult and the esoterics, and rewrite the esoterics in a way that's actually sovereign. Aries will not leave Aries without a major event. Nor will it ingress Taurus without a major event. If you think about outer planets, Uranus said ingressed, and I woke up to, going to the garage with my mom for the yearly test and having my coffee, and I'm having this energy about the White House, and I'm like knowing nothing about what happened. Thinking like, well, if people want to get out of jail, then they should abolish labor camps and everything of the practices of the Epstein years. And then I go back to my cell phone and I'm like, okay, is that fake news? No, it's not fake news. That was an ingress to the seventh house of United States with Sedna. Then imagine Aries. Uranus takes 7 years between one sun and another. Sedna 12 millennia, and we saw the Israel-Palestine and global intifada. And I still wonder if I should have bought red fruits before they taking to bomb Iran again. Germany wants to go boots on ground there. Yeah. This is where. No, seriously, I got the sushi. It was Atlantic roll. Before COVID happened, I was with a person that was my bestie then. We were going down, and then our neighbor that used to work in the health ministry, she said, well, it's gonna be lockdowns. So we went and got sushi, and then we came back and it started to be a lockdown. Um, Amazing sushi. I still have no idea what was going on in that drink. Fortunately, it was not. That was not a ritual abuse problem. And yeah, I don't know. Let's see what is the matter now. The good news. The good news is that having a global total human extinction on the menu generates proportion. Particularly after the release of the Epstein dossiers. Now, of course, it can bifurcate um, Uranus, Uranus Procyon. Uranus Procyon is the upcoming outer planet on Procyon. I will take that in. I'm on my way. Um, um, so Uranus Procyon is the last planet on Procyon. Is the upcoming outer planet on Procyon, and this will be in around 15 years, 14 to 15 years, a little less. Um, which tells us that Uranus would actually be closer to Regulus at the time. Um, Revolution in Regulian. I need to see when was Uranus. If we're talking about the 2050s, 2040s, and we gotta go 80 years from the let's say mid to end 2040s. That would be the 1970s. Uranus Regulus in the 1970s. Yeah. I don't know what happened. Uh, Me trying to do horror on angelic essential oil. And so, um, yeah. I would need to see what happened when Uranus was with Regulus. But other than that, we're not talking about two cities. Is that, and that's supposed to be clear. And and to prevent that, we would need. And when we talk about an Aries, a century-long ingress, the ingress to Aries, around the ingress to Aries was the 29 crisis. I think it was 1 degree Aries. 1 degree Aries, when Aries was in 1 degree Aries. So, um, and this is where we talk about something that closes a century. Now, where was Pluto at 29? Um, It should have been towards the end of Cancer. Feynman had Pluto around my moon, and that was 1917 or 1911 even. And then the Hiroshima and Nagasaki were around Leo. So we're gonna be seeing, the 29 would have been Pluto at the end of Cancer, and Neptune um, Neptune. Feynman had Neptune in Leo. Neptune would be between Leo and Virgo, either still in Leo or between Leo and Virgo. So somewhere around Regulus. So, by the way, memorable podcast moment when I opened when I opened the chart and there is no internet, and I just record a podcast. Anyway, no notes here. State your superpower. So, yeah, that's. Now, here's the thing. There are a lot of things. I know during colonialism there was a discussion of, hey, people use, let's say, I don't know, dark fold, and tell the slaves not to use it, and so on and so forth. But here is the issue. Abolishing occultistic rape is not about, you don't practice it, but we practice it, and so on and so forth. It's between Pluto sextile Aries being total human extinction and passing through that to a successful process of denuclearification. Now, the reason I was trying to see, upon Aries ingress, we would have Pluto not really making a fine aspect with Aries, not squaring, but applying to the trine, where we would have Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And that was the opening trine. The closing trine would be from Sagittarius, so that would be Gen Zers. Was it 9/11? Why is there something twinning? Oh, because it's on the axis of Gemini and Sagittarius, but with Leo, it was because the Pluto, Gemini was the Pluto, I think, of Oppenheimer, definitely of Hitler, and the people that, a lot of the older generation, not the Feynman generation, that would be Pluto Cancer, but the older generation would be Pluto Gemini, and we had the twin bombs. And that winning persisted all the way to the opposition, to the Pluto opposition of the Pluto of the people that developed the bomb. So, nuclear bombing astrology 101. And then we had the closing square with Uranus Aries squaring, which was the Me Too. I'm gonna say it again to the people that think that the Me Too was a phase. Don't, like, pragmatically, practically, like if I was a man with, I don't know, if I was, let's say, an incel, and I would look at astrology, I would try to think about what are my coping mechanisms with a future post Uranus Aries squaring Pluto being the Me Too. Kind of like, if there's a transit that was the witch hunt, and I'm thinking, well, if I can get to Iceland, if I can't, then at least I have a goal, like something to long for, or something like that. So, kind of like an incel right now would need to have an optimum strategy as well. Femicide resulted in the guillotining the warlocks. So it's kind of like doesn't qualify for an optimum strategy. And I don't know, I guess everybody could look at one's chart and see if they have an opposition. What's the point of Thales? What's the point that trines and sextiles both planets? And this is, yeah. Do we have good chances for the closing sextile with the end of Aries in Aries being denuclearification? Yes. Can we withstand a big event that's not along that line? Nope. No. No, we can't. Now, to be incredibly frank, I would be way more worried if Aries was on the 0-degree Aries. Which might mean that we're going towards denuclearification and abolition of occultistic rape. If we are, the religion that's going to do that just had me converted. Um, so, more things to say on this topic. Oh, I try to think what can I say on this topic more. I'm not pessimistic. I'm not pessimistic because I definitely in the past several years I've definitely undergone a lot, and everyone around on a global scale, and I definitely witnessed the way things oscillate and the way things can take an upturn, not just a downturn. And those that are counting on, let's say, I don't know, femicide and stuff, now here's the thing, they might drop an A-bomb, so I don't I still am broadcasting from Israel, and the reason that I'm trying to buy something here is kind of like before a possibility that they would start a war again. That being said, I'm one person broadcasting from a very significant country. But and I've said it countless times in the past years, it's more than whether I would live to broadcast that moment. And it's more so about the fact that this is absolutely the one thing that changes everything, and there's a lot going for that. I know definitely that, if I think about when will Mercury be sextiling the Chiron Aries, also when would Chiron sextile Aries, those would be amazing times to work on the scriptures part, to work on, and also the occult. One of the things that I saw with me practicing, let's say, astrological talismans, um, yeah, no, thank you, was that a lot of the things were on the spot. Not much preparation, and this was even my exalted Jupiter in Cancer. And what's going on? Is it like closed? Okay.
It's open, it just wait.
Okay. Oh, totally. So one of the things that, okay. Okay, so one of the things that I see, um, that could really, really support is starting right off when Mercury sextiles. And starting right off when Mercury sextiles, because and yes, tending to the big things, because just because we are in such timelines, then why not go for the bigger vision? It's not the negotiation of the smaller vision time. Wait a second. And usually, if I think about a lot of our struggles, particularly when it's Neptune associated, Neptune is kind of like what's the underlying factor, what's at the root cause, and usually a lot of our falls and fails are not because we didn't ask, how do you say, are not because we asked for too much, but because we didn't ask for enough. As long as that's aligned with sovereignty. Yeah, I think it is okay. Oh, wait a second. This actually is true. That one. And okay. Um, yep, that's it. So,
That's it. 50 ו-60 אגורות.
אוקיי.
50 ו-60 אגורות.
אז ננסה עם זה.